My daughter asked me to watch her baby for one night while she went with her husband to a business event. While changing the diaper, I found a sealed envelope. I opened it and saw something that should never have been there. Just then, I heard my son-in-law lock the front door and his heavy steps approaching me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I've learned that grandmothers aren't supposed to question things. We're meant to smile, bake cookies, and say, "Yes, dear," when our children call needing favors. At 69, I'd mastered that role perfectly. Or so I thought until the night my daughter Rebecca asked me to watch little Pauline for just one evening. "It's the Whitmore Foundation Gala, Mom," Rebecca had said on the phone that Tuesday afternoon, her voice carrying that particular brightness she used when asking for something. "You know how important his networking is for the foundation." I did know. Philip managed investments for the Whitmore Foundation, a world I'd never fully understood but had learned to nod pleasantly about at family gatherings. My daughter had married him 5 years ago, shortly after she'd finished her MBA. They lived in a restored Victorian in Westport, Connecticut, 40 minutes from my small ranch house in Milford. The kind of home that appeared in architectural magazines, all exposed beams and carefully curated vintage furniture. "Of course I'll watch Pauline," I'd said, already mentally preparing the overnight bag I'd need. "What time should I come over?" "Actually, could you stay at our place? She sleeps better in her own crib, and all her things are here. We'll be back by midnight, I promise." Something in her tone made me pause. Rebecca had always been independent, even as a child. Asking me to stay overnight felt unusual, almost desperate. But grandmothers don't question, do they? We accommodate. I arrived at 6:30 with my small bag and a container of the chicken soup Rebecca had loved as a child. The house smelled of expensive candles and fresh paint. They'd just redone the nursery Rebecca had mentioned, choosing a designer who specialized in developmental color theory, whatever that meant. Pauline was 8 months old, all chubby cheeks and curious brown eyes. She reached for me immediately when Rebecca brought her down, and my heart did that familiar squeeze it always did around my granddaughter. This, at least, was uncomplicated love. "Her bedtime is 7:30, Rebecca instructed, gesturing to a printed schedule magnetized to the refrigerator. The level of detail was impressive. Feeding times, nap protocols, emergency contacts numbered 1 through 7. There are bottles in the fridge already measured. The monitor is on, and I'll have my phone if you need anything." Philip appeared in the doorway, adjusting his cufflinks. He was handsome in that sharp-edged way that made me slightly uncomfortable, all angles in calculation. "Thanks for doing this, Tina," he said, but his eyes were already on his watch. "We really appreciate it." They left in a flurry of last-minute instructions and blown kisses, and then the house settled into that particular silence that comes with old walls and modern insulation. Pauline babbled happily from her bouncer, and I let myself relax into the evening routine. This was familiar territory. Warming bottles, singing old lullabies, the sweet weight of a baby against my shoulder. By 7:45, Pauline was fed, bathed, and drowsy. I carried her upstairs to the nursery, that pristine room with its cloud-painted ceiling and organic cotton everything. The diaper-changing station was an elaborate affair with built-in storage and a cushioned pad that probably cost more than my first car. Pauline had made a mess, the kind that required a complete outfit change and careful cleaning. I worked efficiently, having done this countless times with Rebecca, and then with the neighborhood children I'd helped care for over the years. There was a rhythm to it, a practiced competence that came back like muscle memory. That's when I felt it. The crinkle of paper, where there should only be soft cotton. At first, I thought it was just the diaper's construction, some new feature I wasn't familiar with. But as I lifted Pauline to clean her, my fingers caught on something definitely foreign. I set her down gently on the towel I'd spread beside the changing pad and investigated. Tucked into the back of the diaper, sealed in a small plastic bag and then enclosed in a manila envelope no bigger than my palm, was something that made my hands go cold. The envelope was sealed with clear tape, the kind you'd use for waterproofing. Someone had hidden this deliberately, carefully. Someone who knew that a grandmother changing a diaper late in the evening wouldn't be expected to notice anything unusual. My heart hammered as I peeled back the tape. Inside was a USB drive and a folded piece of paper. The paper was covered in handwriting I didn't recognize. Tight, controlled script in blue ink. My hands shook as I unfolded it. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. Philip Whitmore embezzled $2.3 million from the Whitmore Foundation. The evidence is on this drive. I confronted him 2 weeks ago. He said he'd handle it. I don't trust him. His wife doesn't know. I'm leaving this where I know it'll be found if something happens to me. The baby's grandmother changes her every night. She seems smart. God, I hope she's smart enough. James Adams, CFO, Whitmore Foundation. The date at the bottom was from 3 weeks ago. My mind raced. James Adams. I'd heard that name. Rebecca had mentioned him once. Said he was Philip's closest friend from business school. They'd started at the foundation together. And now he was leaving messages in my granddaughter's diaper about embezzlement and death. Pauline cooed, oblivious, reaching for her toes. I finished changing her with trembling hands, tucked the envelope and USB drive into the pocket of my cardigan, and lifted her into my arms. She felt heavier suddenly, or perhaps I felt weaker. The weight of what I'd just discovered pressed against my ribs. I needed to think. I needed to. The sound of a key in the front door lock stopped my breath. They weren't supposed to be back until midnight. It was barely 8:30. I glanced at my phone. No missed calls, no messages. Just the sudden, heavy presence of someone entering the house below. The lock clicked home. Not the normal sound of it disengaging, but the deliberate turn of someone securing it, locking it from the inside. Then footsteps. Not Rebecca's light step in heels, but heavy, purposeful strides. Male footsteps crossing the hardwood of the foyer, pausing, then heading toward the stairs. Philip's voice carried up, cold and empty of the pleasant veneer he usually wore. "Tina, we need to talk about what you found." My blood turned to ice water. Pauline squirmed in my arms, sensing my tension. The USB drive felt like it was burning through my cardigan pocket. He'd known. Somehow he'd known I would find it. Or maybe, the thought struck me like a physical blow. Maybe James Adams hadn't hidden it at all. Maybe this was a trap, and I'd walked right into it. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. I heard the first step creak under his weight. "Don't make this difficult," Philip called up, his tone conversational, almost friendly. "Just give me what you found, and we can all forget this happened. Pauline needs her grandmother, doesn't she? It would be such a shame if something happened to you. Falls are so common in women your age." The second step creaked. The third. I looked at Pauline, her innocent face, her tiny fingers curled against my chest. Looked at the locked door below, the man climbing the stairs, the evidence in my pocket that could mean my death. I'd spent 69 years being accommodating, pleasant, unquestioning. That woman, I realized with sudden crystalline clarity, was about to get me killed. The footsteps continued their steady climb, and I began calculating how many seconds I had before Philip Whitmore reached the top of the stairs. I had perhaps 10 seconds, maybe less. Years of being underestimated had taught me one valuable skill: thinking clearly while appearing confused. I tucked Pauline against my shoulder, patted her back with what I hoped looked like grandmother obliviousness, and called down in my most tremulous voice, "Philip, is that you? Is everything all right? Did Rebecca forget something?" The footsteps paused. Fifth step. I could picture him there, recalculating, wondering if I really had found the envelope or if he'd acted on paranoid assumption. "Just came back for some documents," he said, his voice smoothing into something more casual. "Rebecca's still at the event. Didn't mean to startle you." A lie. I could hear it in the forced lightness of his tone. But he'd given me an opening, a thin sliver of doubt I could exploit. "Oh, thank goodness," I said, injecting relief into my words. I thought something terrible had happened. Pauline just had a massive diaper situation. I was about to put her down. "You gave me such a fright." I moved to the nursery doorway. Pauline held protectively in front of me like a shield. Philip stood on the landing now, his 6-foot frame blocking the stairs. He'd removed his jacket and tie. His dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. His eyes, usually so controlled, held something feral. "Why don't you let me put her down?" he said, extending his arms. You look tired, Tina. Why don't you head home? I can handle things from here. Every instinct screamed at me not to hand over Pauline. She was my leverage, the only thing stopping him from… From what? What exactly did I think he would do? But James Adams's note burned in my memory. I'm probably dead. Don't be silly, I said, keeping my voice light, grandmotherly. I promised Rebecca I'd stay the night. Besides, Pauline's already drowsy. Let me just get her settled. I turned back into the nursery before he could respond, my heart hammering so hard I was certain he could hear it. I laid Pauline in her crib with exaggerated care, tucking her favorite blanket around her, winding the mobile above her head, buying time, thinking. The USB drive and note were in my cardigan pocket. I needed to hide them. But where? Philip would search me. Search the room. I could feel him in the doorway now, watching, waiting. Pauline's eyes were closing, her tiny fist curled against her cheek. The mobile played its soft lullaby. I hummed along, my mind racing through possibilities. The diaper pail. Too obvious. The changing table drawers. He'd check there first. My purse downstairs. Might as well hand it to him. Then my eyes landed on the humidifier in the corner, one of those expensive ultrasonic models with a large water reservoir. It was running, a gentle mist rising from it. I'd refilled it earlier, Rebecca had reminded me. She's fighting sleep tonight, I said, still humming, moving toward the humidifier as if to check it. Must be all the excitement of Grandma visiting. I crouched down, ostensibly adjusting the mist level. My hands shook as I unsealed the water reservoir. The USB drive was small, waterproof in its plastic bag. I dropped it in, heard the tiny splash, resealed the top. The note I folded smaller still, and tucked it into my bra. There we go, I said, straightening with a small grunt that wasn't entirely faked. These old knees. Philip was fully in the doorway now, his shoulder against the frame. Tina, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. I turned to face him, channeling every ounce of confused grandmother I could muster. Of course, dear. What is it? Did you find anything unusual when you were changing Pauline? Anything that didn't belong? The directness surprised me. He was done with pretense. I let my face crease with concern, tilted my head in that way Rebecca had always called my worried bird expression. Unusual? What do you mean? Was there something wrong with her diaper? I changed her completely, used the cream Rebecca leaves out. Not the diaper itself, something hidden. In the diaper. I blinked at him. Let silence stretch for 3 heartbeats. Hidden in the diaper? Philip, what on earth are you talking about? Who would hide something in a baby's diaper? His jaw tightened. He was trying to read me, to see past the grandmother facade to whatever calculation might be happening beneath. I held his gaze with genuine confusion, because part of me, the part that had spent 69 years being exactly what people expected, really didn't want to believe this was happening. James Adams, he said finally, his voice flat. James hid something that could cause a lot of trouble for a lot of people. He told someone he was leaving it somewhere safe, somewhere I wouldn't think to look. I think he meant here. James Adams? I repeated, and this time the tremor in my voice was real. Your friend from the foundation? The one Rebecca said was so nice? Why would he hide something here? He's dead, Tina. The words landed like stones. I gripped the edge of the crib, genuine shock making my knees weak. What? Car accident. 3 weeks ago. Drove off Route 15 in the rain. But before he died, he told his assistant he'd left insurance. That's the word he used. Insurance. And I think you found it. I shook my head slowly, the gesture of an old woman trying to process terrible news. I don't understand. Why would you think I found anything? I just changed Pauline's diaper and put her to bed. That's all. He studied me for a long moment. I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. How much does she know? Is she really this oblivious? Can I risk believing her? Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something flickered across his face. Frustration, maybe fear. He typed a quick response. I need to check the changing table, he said. And your bag. It's nothing personal, Tina. Just a precaution. Philip, you're frightening me. Not entirely a lie. What's going on? Should I call Rebecca? Rebecca's busy. Give me your phone. My blood ran cold, but I pulled it from my cardigan pocket with shaking hands. He took it, powered it off, slipped it into his own pocket. Just until I figure this out, he said. I can't have you calling anyone until I know what James did. He moved past me to the changing table, began systematically opening drawers, checking under the pad, even unzipping the diaper disposal bags. I stood frozen by the crib, one hand resting on the rail, watching Pauline sleep, watching Philip destroy any pretense that I was safe here. When he finished with the changing table, he turned to the closet, then the dresser. Efficient. Thorough. The search of someone who'd done this before. Where's your purse? He asked. Downstairs. Kitchen counter. Stay here. He left, and I heard him descend the stairs, heard the sounds of drawers opening in the kitchen, the rustle of him going through my bag. I moved quickly to the nursery window. It overlooked the backyard, a 15-foot drop to the patio below. Even if I could get it open without alerting Philip, even if I could somehow get Pauline and myself down safely, where would we go? The neighbors' houses were dark, set back behind their own walls and hedges. This was Westport. People valued privacy. Philip's footsteps returned. He appeared in the doorway with my purse, turned it upside down on the rocking chair. Wallet, keys, reading glasses, tissues, the small photo album I carried everywhere. Nothing incriminating. He picked up the photo album, flipped through it roughly. Pictures of Rebecca as a child, of Pauline, of my late husband, Tom. He tossed it aside. Strip the diaper pail, he ordered. Empty it out. I want to see everything. I moved to comply, pulling the bags from the pail, my stomach churning at the smell. He watched as I opened them, as I sorted through soiled diapers with shaking hands. The humiliation was calculated, I realized, breaking me down, showing me how powerless I was. When I finished, he nodded toward the bathroom. Your pockets. Turn them inside out. I did, revealing lint, a crumpled tissue. Nothing more. The note pressed against my ribs, hidden beneath my bra, felt enormous. I was certain he could see it, that he would demand I undress completely. But he didn't. Some last shred of civility, or perhaps the awareness that he was already crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. His phone buzzed again. This time when he checked it, his face went rigid. Damn it. He looked at me, then at Pauline sleeping peacefully in her crib, then back at his phone. Some calculation was happening, some decision being weighed. You're going to stay in this room tonight, he said finally, with Pauline. I'm locking the door from the outside. There's a bathroom attached. You'll be comfortable enough. In the morning when Rebecca gets home, we'll sort this out properly. You can't lock me in here. The protest came out weaker than I intended. Philip, please. I don't know what you're looking for, but I promise you I don't have it. Then you have nothing to worry about, he said, backing toward the door. This is just a precaution, for everyone's safety. What about Pauline? What if she needs something in the night? You're her grandmother. You'll manage. He pulled the door closed. I heard the lock click from the outside. An old-fashioned key lock, the kind the Victorian had throughout. Then his footsteps retreating down the hall, down the stairs. I stood in the soft glow of the nightlight, listening to Pauline breathe, my own breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Locked in, my phone taken, evidence hidden in a humidifier and pressed against my chest. And somewhere downstairs, my son-in-law was calling someone, making plans, deciding what to do about the grandmother who knew too much. I moved to the window again, tested it quietly, painted shut. Of course. Then I heard something that made my blood freeze. The front door opening. Voices. Philip and someone else. A woman's voice, sharp and efficient. Not Rebecca. You're sure she found it? The woman asked. I'm not sure of anything, Philip replied. But James told his assistant he left insurance, and she's the only one who's been near that baby besides Rebecca and the nanny. Then we search her properly. Strip search if necessary. And if she really doesn't have it, we make her tell us where it is. She's 69 years old, Linda. She seemed genuinely confused. Confused women her age end up in memory care facilities all the time, Linda said coldly. One call to Adult Protective Services, concerns about her competency, And suddenly she's not a credible witness to anything. Problem solved. Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the house. I looked at Pauline, sleeping so peacefully. Looked at the locked door, the painted shut window, the humidifier containing evidence that could either save me or get me killed. And I realized with terrible clarity that Philip and his associate weren't just trying to find what James Adams had hidden. They were planning to make sure I could never tell anyone about it. I had perhaps 2 hours before they came back upstairs. Maybe less. The nursery had an attached bathroom, small but functional. I locked myself inside and pulled out James Adams's note with trembling fingers, smoothing it against the marble countertop. The blue ink seemed to glow under the vanity lights. I read it again, more carefully this time, looking for anything I'd missed. The handwriting was controlled but showed signs of stress. Letters compressed at the end of certain words. The signature slightly shaky. James had been terrified when he wrote this. Philip Whitmore embezzled $2.3 million from the Whitmore Foundation. The foundation. Philip had always spoken about it with such pride at family dinners. A charitable organization focused on education reform, funded by wealthy donors who wanted tax write-offs and their names on buildings. Philip was the investment director. He managed the endowment, made decisions about where to allocate funds, and he'd been stealing from it for how long? James's note didn't say. I thought about the renovations to this house, the new cars every 2 years, Rebecca's sudden ability to quit her job after Pauline was born, to become a full-time mother in a way I'd never been able to afford. I'd assumed Philip's salary was generous, but $2.3 million generous? My daughter had no idea. I was certain of that. Rebecca was ambitious, sometimes materialistic, but not criminal. She'd married Philip for love, or at least for the version of himself he'd shown her. The successful young executive with impeccable credentials and a bright future. Not the man who'd locked his mother-in-law in a nursery. I heard footsteps in the hallway. 2 sets. They stopped outside the door. Tina? Philip's voice, falsely gentle. We need to talk to you. Can you open the bathroom door? I flushed the toilet, ran the water loudly, bought myself 10 more seconds to think. Just a moment, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. I tucked the note back into my bra, checked my reflection in the mirror. White hair disheveled, face pale, eyes wide with fear. Good. Let them see a frightened old woman. Let them underestimate me the way everyone always had. I opened the bathroom door. Philip stood in the nursery with a woman I'd never seen before. She was perhaps 40, dressed in expensive casual wear, cashmere sweater, tailored pants, leather boots. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her eyes were the coldest I'd ever seen. Calculating. Predatory. Tina, this is Linda Vance, Philip said. She's an attorney with the foundation. We need to discuss something with you. I want to call Rebecca, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. This is her house. She should be here. Rebecca is exactly why we need to talk, Linda said, moving closer. She had a leather portfolio under her arm, professional and threatening all at once. You care about your daughter, don't you, Tina? Of course I do. Then you'll want to protect her from making a terrible mistake. Linda settled into the rocking chair, crossing her legs. May I be frank with you? I nodded, not trusting my voice. James Adams was mentally unstable, she said, her tone clinical. He'd been displaying signs of paranoid delusion for months before his death, making wild accusations against Philip, claiming financial improprieties that never existed. We have documentation from his therapist, emails showing his deteriorating mental state. It was tragic, really. I don't understand what this has to do with me, I said. James told people he was leaving evidence of his delusions in a safe place, Philip interjected. If that evidence surfaces now after his death, it could destroy the foundation. Hundreds of children would lose their scholarships. Donors would pull funding. My career would be over. And Rebecca, Linda added softly, would be investigated as a potential accomplice. Even if she's innocent, and I'm sure she is, the scandal would ruin her. Her name in the papers, her child's picture on the news. You know how these things work, Tina. Mud sticks. My chest tightened. This was the leverage they'd been planning. Not just threats against me, but against Rebecca. Against Pauline. So, if you found anything unusual tonight, Philip said, anything James might have hidden, the kind thing, the protective thing, would be to give it to us. Let us make this go away quietly. Let your daughter have her life back. I looked between them. These two people who spoke of destroying a man's reputation with such casual efficiency. James Adams was dead. They couldn't hurt him anymore. But they could use him, twist his final act of courage into evidence of madness. I didn't find anything, I said, meeting Philip's eyes. I told you that. I changed Pauline's diaper. I put her to bed. That's all. Linda's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her gaze. Philip mentioned you seemed nervous when he came home. Startled. He locked the front door and came upstairs without announcing himself properly. Of course I was startled. I'm an old woman alone with a baby. You're not that old, Tina, Linda said, leaning forward. And you're not that fragile. Philip tells me you still drive, live independently, manage your own finances. Very competent for someone your age. The shift in her tone made my skin crawl. This was a warning shot. They were establishing that I was competent enough to be a threat. I'm fortunate, I said carefully. Good genes. My mother lived to 93, sharp until the end. Let's hope you inherited her longevity, Linda said. Though you know confusion can set in so suddenly in the elderly. One day you're fine, the next you're wandering around, forgetting where you put things, making wild claims that no one believes. There it was. The threat, wrapped in concern. Is that what happened to James? I asked, unable to stop myself. Sudden confusion? The room went very still. Pauline stirred in her crib, but didn't wake. Philip's jaw tightened, and Linda's eyes went flat and dangerous. James drove off a bridge in the rain, Philip said slowly. It was an accident. A tragedy. Of course, I said quickly. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. I'm just tired and confused myself. Linda stood, smoothing her cashmere sweater. I think you should consider very carefully what's at stake here, Tina. Philip is willing to be generous. If you help us, if you tell us where James left his documents, he'll make sure you're comfortable. Very comfortable. A nice memory care facility, top-rated private room, your expenses covered for life. You'd be safe, cared for, and Rebecca would never have to know about any of this unpleasantness. And if I can't help you, I said slowly, because I genuinely don't have what you're looking for, then we'd have to consider that you're being obstructive, Linda said, that you're choosing to protect James's delusions over your own daughter's welfare. That would be very troubling. We might have to involve authorities, adult protective services, courts. It would be messy, Tina. Painful for everyone. She moved to the door and Philip followed. At the threshold, Linda turned back. You have until morning to think about it. If you remember finding anything, a USB drive, papers, anything at all, just tell Philip. This can all be resolved quietly. They left, locking the door again. I heard them descend the stairs, heard the murmur of their voices in the foyer. Then silence. I stood in the dark nursery, Pauline's breathing the only sound, and felt rage boil up through my fear. They thought I was weak, thought I was stupid, thought 69 years of being pleasant and accommodating meant I had no spine. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I retrieved the USB drive from the humidifier with shaking hands, dried it carefully on a burp cloth. Then I sat in the rocking chair, pulled out my reading glasses, the ones Philip had dumped from my purse and left scattered on the floor, and examined the note again. James Adams had been methodical. The note was dated, timed, even included his employee ID number at the bottom. He'd known he might die, known that his evidence needed to survive him, and he'd trusted that a grandmother changing her granddaughter's diaper would be smart enough to understand. I stood and moved to the nursery bookshelf, running my fingers along the spines. Board books, picture books, a few parenting guides. Then I found what I was looking for. A hollowed-out copy of The Velveteen Rabbit, one of those decorative safe books people bought at home goods stores. Rebecca had displayed it here, probably never realizing it actually opened. I tucked the USB drive and note inside, placed it back on the shelf between Goodnight Moon and Where the Wild Things Are. Then I did something that surprised even myself. I took off my cardigan and used the sleeve tie to wedge the bathroom door handle, creating tension that would make noise if someone tried to force it open. I moved the rocking chair to block the main door, positioned so anyone entering would have to push it aside loudly. And then I sat on the floor next to Pauline's crib, back against the wall where I could see both doors, and I started to plan. Philip had made a mistake bringing Linda here. She was too controlled, too professional. This wasn't her first cover-up. That meant there were patterns, other victims, other accidents like James Adams. That meant there were records, trails, connections. I thought about James's note. The evidence is on this drive. What evidence? Bank records, emails, transaction logs? Whatever it was, it had been enough to make James certain Philip would kill to protect it. Had been enough to get James killed. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Fear had crystallized into something harder, clearer. I'd spent my entire adult life being underestimated. By my husband Tom, who'd made all our financial decisions without consulting me. By bosses who'd passed me over for promotions. By doctors who'd dismissed my concerns as nerves. By everyone who'd seen gray hair and comfortable shoes and assumed I had no fire left. But I'd outlived most of them. Survived Tom's gambling debts. Raised Rebecca alone after he died. Paid off the mortgage through sheer stubborn determination. I hadn't survived 69 years by being weak. Pauline made a small sound in her sleep, her fist curling and uncurling. I looked at her perfect face, her impossible innocence, and I understood with terrible clarity what was really at stake. This wasn't just about protecting myself, or even about justice for James Adams. This was about what kind of man my granddaughter would grow up thinking her father was. What kind of world she'd inherit if men like Philip could steal and kill without consequence. I heard a sound from downstairs, a door closing, maybe an engine starting. I moved quietly to the window, peered through the curtain. Linda's Mercedes was pulling away, her taillights disappearing down the tree-lined street. Philip was alone now, and somewhere in this house, there had to be something I could use. I checked my watch. 10:47 p.m. Rebecca wasn't due home until midnight, but I didn't trust that anymore. Didn't trust anything Philip had said. Pauline stirred, whimpered softly. I moved to her crib, stroked her soft hair until she settled. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered. "Grandma's going to fix this." Then I heard it. Philip's footsteps climbing the stairs again. Faster this time. Angrier. The doorknob rattled. "Tina, open the door. Now." His voice had changed. The pretense of civility was gone. "I can't," I called back, genuine fear creeping into my voice. "You locked it from the outside. Don't play games with me." Something slammed against the door. His fist, or maybe his shoulder. "I know you found it. Linda might believe your confused grandmother act, but I know you. Rebecca talks about how sharp you are, how you never forget anything. You found James's evidence, and you hid it somewhere in this room." Another slam against the door. The old Victorian frame shuddered. "Philip, please," I said, moving to stand between the door and Pauline's crib. "You're scaring me. You're going to wake Pauline. Give me what James left, and I'll let you walk out of here. We'll tell Rebecca you weren't feeling well, that you went home early. You'll never hear from me again." "I don't have anything." "Then I'm coming in. And when I do, you'd better hope I'm wrong about you." I heard him step back, heard the jingle of keys. He was going to unlock the door and come in, and this time there would be no pretense, no careful civility. I had maybe 30 seconds to decide. Fight or surrender. Pauline started to cry, sensing the tension, the anger vibrating through the walls. And in that moment, holding my granddaughter's terrified gaze, I made my choice. I started screaming. Not helpless screaming. Not the panicked cries of a confused old woman. I screamed words, clear and loud, the kind that would carry through these old walls to every house on this quiet Westport street. "Help! Someone help! He's trying to break in! Call 911! Pauline's cries joined mine, her wails echoing off the nursery walls. The sound was tremendous, primal, impossible to ignore. Philip froze on the other side of the door. I could feel his indecision, could picture him calculating whether neighbors would hear, whether someone would call police, whether the risk was worth it. "Tina, stop," he hissed. "Stop it right now." "Help! Please! He has me locked in!" I screamed louder, scooping Pauline up, holding her against my chest. Her crying intensified, feeding off my terror, and I let it. Let the whole neighborhood hear what was happening in this perfect Victorian house. The doorknob stopped rattling. Footsteps retreated rapidly down the stairs. I heard the front door slam, then nothing but Pauline's sobs and my own ragged breathing. I moved to the window, pulled back the curtain with shaking hands. Philip was outside, phone pressed to his ear, pacing the front lawn. Even from here I could see the tension in his shoulders, the aggressive jab of his finger as he spoke to whoever was on the other end. Then, I saw it. A light turning on in the house across the street. The Hendersons. Rebecca had mentioned them once. Retired couple, friendly but kept to themselves. Mr. Henderson appeared on his porch, looking toward our house with concern. Philip saw him too. He straightened, smoothed his hair, and walked over with that easy confidence I'd seen him use at family dinners. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could read the body language. Philip gesturing casually toward the house, probably explaining away the screaming. Mr. Henderson nodding but not quite convinced, his wife appearing behind him in her bathrobe. I bounced Pauline gently, whispering nonsense comfort into her hair, watching this performance below. Philip was good. His posture was open, apologetic. He was probably spinning some story about his confused mother-in-law, about Pauline having a rough night, about everything being under control. Mr. Henderson seemed satisfied. He nodded one more time, patted Philip on the shoulder, and went back inside. His porch light stayed on, though. That small detail gave me hope. Philip stood on the lawn for another moment, staring up at the nursery window. Even from this distance, I could see the cold fury in his face. Then he came back inside. I heard him climbing the stairs, slower this time. Controlled. He stopped outside the locked door, and when he spoke, his voice was perfectly calm. "That was very clever, Tina. You got the neighbor's attention. But you should know. I just explained to Mr. Henderson that you've been having some episodes. Confusion. Paranoia. He was very understanding. Said his own mother went through the same thing before they had to move her to assisted living." My stomach dropped. "If you scream again," Philip continued, "they'll just think it's another episode. And if police do come, well, I'm the concerned son-in-law trying to care for his wife's deteriorating mother. You're the confused woman making wild accusations. Who do you think they'll believe?" He was right. The bitter truth of it made my throat tight. A well-dressed, articulate man in his own home versus a 69-year-old woman screaming about conspiracies and murder. The police would see exactly what Philip wanted them to see. "I'm going to give you one more chance," he said. "In the morning, Rebecca will be home. She'll ask how the night went. You can either tell her everything was fine, that you didn't find anything unusual, or you can tell her the truth. But if you tell her the truth, Tina, you need to understand what will happen next." I said nothing, just held Pauline closer. "I'll have you evaluated. I have a psychiatrist on retainer, Dr. Wesley Marsh, excellent reputation. He'll find signs of dementia, confusion, paranoid delusions. All very well documented. Rebecca will be devastated, of course, but she'll agree that you need care. Professional care. The kind of care where you don't get to make phone calls unsupervised, where no one takes you seriously if you make accusations." "Rebecca would never agree to that," I whispered. "Rebecca is exhausted, Tina. She's been up every 3 hours with Pauline. She's isolated from her friends. She's anxious about money even though I tell her not to worry. If I suggest that you're becoming a danger to yourself, that you might hurt Pauline through confusion or neglect, she'll listen. She'll do what's necessary to protect her daughter." The manipulation was breathtaking. He'd already been working on Rebecca, already planting seeds of doubt about my competence. How long had he been planning this? Since before tonight, certainly. Maybe since the moment James Adams had confronted him about the embezzlement. "Sleep on it," Philip said. "Morning will come fast. Make the right choice." His footsteps retreated. I heard a door close downstairs. His study, probably. He wasn't leaving. He was settling in. making sure I couldn't escape or communicate with anyone until Rebecca returned. Pauline finally quieted against my shoulder, exhausted from crying. I laid her back in the crib, covered her with her blanket, and watched her tiny chest rise and fall. She looked so much like Rebecca had at that age. The same dark lashes, the same rosebud mouth. I thought about my daughter at 8 months old, how fiercely I'd loved her, how desperately I'd wanted to give her a better life than I'd had. I'd worked 2 jobs after Tom died, had forgone vacations and new clothes and any kind of social life to make sure Rebecca had opportunities, had watched her graduate summa cum laude, had cried at her wedding, had held Pauline in the hospital and thought, this was what all the sacrifice was for. And now Philip Whitmore thought he could use that love against me, thought he could weaponize my relationship with my daughter to keep me silent. He'd made a mistake. I moved to the bookshelf, retrieved the Velveteen Rabbit with its hidden cargo. The USB drive felt impossibly small in my palm. James Adams had died for whatever was on this, had trusted that whoever found it would be brave enough to use it. But how? I was locked in a nursery with no phone, no computer, no way to contact anyone. Even if I could get out, Philip was downstairs waiting. Even if I could get past him, where would I go at 11 o'clock at night with a baby? I needed to think like James had thought, methodically, strategically. James had known he might die. He'd prepared for it, left evidence, left a note explaining everything. But he'd also left it in a place that only made sense if you understood the full context. A grandmother changing a diaper. Why had he assumed the grandmother would be smart enough? Unless, my breath caught, unless James had known me, or known of me. Had Rebecca talked about me at the foundation events she'd attended? Had she mentioned her sharp mother who still did her own taxes, who'd managed a household budget for decades, who never forgot a detail? I thought back to James's note. The baby's grandmother changes her every night. She seems smart. Not the grandmother. The baby's grandmother. Specific, personal. James had been watching, had known our routine somehow. And if he'd been watching, if he'd been that careful, then maybe... I looked around the nursery with new eyes. This room had been renovated 3 months ago. Rebecca had been excited about it, had video called me to show off the new design. But before that, this had been Philip's home office, where he'd worked from home during the pandemic, where he'd managed foundation business, where he might have kept records. I began searching methodically, quietly, felt along the baseboards for loose sections, checked behind the dresser, under the changing table. Nothing. Then I noticed something odd about the closet. It was large for a nursery closet, with built-in shelving that seemed deeper than necessary. I stepped inside, ran my hands along the back wall. There, a subtle seam in the drywall, almost invisible but detectable by touch. I pressed gently, and a small panel popped open, maybe 12 inches square. A old-fashioned document safe was built into the wall behind it, the kind with a combination lock. My hands trembled as I considered this. Philip had locked me in a room that contained his own safe. Either he'd forgotten about it in his panic, or he assumed I'd never find it. But what was the combination? I tried the obvious. Rebecca's birthday. Nothing. Pauline's birthday. Nothing. Philip's birthday. I didn't even know it. Then I remembered something Rebecca had mentioned once, casually, over lunch. Philip was sentimental about odd things. He'd proposed to Rebecca on the anniversary of the day they'd met. He'd had that date engraved inside their wedding rings. I pulled up the photo album Philip had dumped on the floor, flipped to the wedding pictures. There was a close-up of their hands, rings gleaming. I could just make out the engraving, 04-17-17. I tried it on the safe, 04-17-17. The lock clicked open. Inside were files. Dozens of files, organized with obsessive precision. Bank statements, transfer records, emails printed and highlighted. And at the top, a manila folder labeled Insurance J. Adams. James's insurance. The evidence he'd left on the USB drive. But Philip had his own copies, kept here in a safe in what used to be his office. Kept close where he could monitor them, where he thought no one would ever look. My hands shook as I pulled out the folder. Inside were transaction records showing systematic embezzlement over 3 years. But it was worse than the $2.3 million James had mentioned. Much worse. Philip had stolen over $8 million, and the records showed he hadn't worked alone. There were names, dates, authorization codes. Linda Vance had signed off on fraudulent audits. The foundation's chairman, Harold Whitmore, Philip's father, had approved fake grant distributions. This wasn't one man's crime. This was institutional corruption. My mind reeled. Philip's father was involved. That meant family money, family lawyers, family power protecting this. That meant the foundation, the Whitmore Foundation, was essentially a front for money laundering. And James Adams had discovered it all. I heard movement downstairs. Footsteps, then voices. Rebecca's voice, high and confused. "What do you mean Mom's having an episode?" She was home early. I heard Philip's reply, too muffled to make out the words. But the tone was soothing, concerned. He was already spinning his story, already painting me as confused, unreliable. "I want to see her," Rebecca said, louder now. "She's sleeping. She was very agitated earlier. I didn't want to worry you, but she was making strange accusations, acting paranoid. I think we need to consider that she might need more support than we realized." "That's ridiculous. My mother is fine." "She's sharper than both of us." "Becca, listen to me." Philip's voice dropped, became intimate. "I know this is hard to hear, but tonight she was screaming about people trying to hurt her. She scared Pauline. The neighbors heard. I had to explain to the Hendersons that you were dealing with a family medical situation." Silence. Then Rebecca, her voice smaller. "She scared Pauline? She's in the nursery with her now." I locked the door from the outside to make sure she didn't try to leave with the baby in her state. "I've been monitoring them on the baby cam." I looked up sharply. The baby monitor, of course. Philip had been watching the whole time. Had seen me search the room, had seen me open the safe. No. Wait. The monitor was angled toward the crib, not toward the closet. I'd been careful to stay out of its field of view without even realizing it. Years of being invisible had taught me how to move through spaces without drawing attention. "I want to see her right now," Rebecca said. Footsteps on the stairs. Both of them. I had maybe 30 seconds. I couldn't hide the files, couldn't explain them away, but I could. I grabbed my phone from where Philip had left it on the dresser. He'd powered it off but hadn't taken it with him when he'd gone downstairs. I powered it on, waited precious seconds for it to boot up, then quickly photographed every page in the insurance folder. The transaction records, the authorization signatures, everything. The photos uploaded to my cloud storage just as I heard the key turning in the lock. I shoved the files back in the safe, closed it, pushed the panel shut, moved to stand by Pauline's crib, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. The door opened. Rebecca stood there in her evening gown, mascara smudged, looking between me and Philip with utter confusion. "Mom? Are you okay?" I looked at my daughter, at Philip behind her, his face a mask of concern, at Pauline sleeping peacefully in her crib, and I made the hardest decision of my life. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady. "Just a little tired. It's been a long night." Philip's eyes narrowed. He'd expected me to tell Rebecca everything. Expected me to sound hysterical, paranoid, exactly as he'd described. But I'd learned something in 69 years. Sometimes the smartest move is to let your opponent think they've won. "Philip said you were upset," Rebecca pressed. "That you were screaming." "Pauline had a nightmare," I said, meeting Philip's gaze directly. "She was crying so hard I thought something was wrong. I may have overreacted. These old walls carry sound, you know. I'm sorry if I worried the neighbors." Rebecca's shoulders sagged with relief. "Oh, Mom, you scared me. Philip made it sound like—" She glanced at her husband. "He was worried about you." "I'm sorry for the concern," Philip said smoothly, but his eyes never left mine. "I probably overreacted myself. It's been a stressful week." We stood there, the three of us, maintaining this careful fiction. Pauline slept on, oblivious. "I should get home," I said. "Let you two settle in." "Are you sure?" Rebecca asked. "It's late. You could sleep in the guest room." "I'd rather be in my own bed," I said, which was true. I needed to be somewhere Philip couldn't control, couldn't monitor. "I'll drive you," Philip offered. "Absolutely not," I said quickly. "You've both had a long night. I'm perfectly capable of driving myself." Rebecca looked between us, sensing something but unable to name it. "Mom, if something happened tonight—" "Nothing happened," I said firmly. "Pauline needed her grandmother, and I was here. That's all." I gathered my things, kissed Pauline's sleeping forehead, hugged Rebecca at the door. Philip watched silently, and I could feel his confusion radiating off him in waves. I'd thrown him off balance. Good. As I drove away from that beautiful house, my hands steady on the wheel despite everything, I checked my rearview mirror. Philip stood in the doorway, phone already at his ear, probably calling Linda Vance to explain this new development. They thought they'd neutralized me. Thought my silence meant surrender. They had no idea I'd just stolen everything they'd worked so hard to hide. And by morning, I was going to make sure the right people saw it. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the one place Philip would never think to look for me, the Milford Public Library. It stayed open late that night, a community service for students and insomniacs. I parked under a streetlight, grabbed my purse, and walked inside on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. The night librarian, a young woman with purple hair and multiple piercings, barely glanced up from her book. Perfect. I found a computer terminal in the back corner, logged into my email, and started downloading the photos from my cloud storage. My hands shook as I opened the first image. The transaction records were clear, damning. Philip had created fake grant recipients, shell companies with legitimate-sounding names: Future Scholars Initiative, Urban Education Alliance, Tomorrow's Leaders Foundation. Each one received substantial transfers from the Whitmore Foundation Endowment. Each one was registered to addresses that I quickly verified didn't exist. The money had been filtered through these fake charities, then transferred again to offshore accounts. The paper trail was complex, but not impossible to follow. James Adams had highlighted the key connections in yellow marker, had added handwritten notes in the margins explaining the scheme. I checked my watch, 11:47 p.m. I had maybe 6 hours before Philip realized I wasn't cowering at home, before he understood what I'd really done tonight. I needed allies. But who? The police? Philip's father probably had connections to the local department. The FBI? I was a 69-year-old woman with smartphone photos and a wild story about embezzlement and murder. They'd need time to investigate, and time was the one thing I didn't have. Then I remembered something from James's note. He'd mentioned confronting Philip 2 weeks before his death, had said Philip promised to handle it, but James must have had someone he trusted, someone he'd told about his suspicions. I pulled up the Whitmore Foundation website on the library computer, found the staff directory. There were 12 employees listed, including Philip as investment director and Linda Vance as general counsel. James Adams's photo was still there, a memorial banner across it. In loving memory. I scanned the other names. One jumped out. Ruby Huang, director of operations. In her photo, she stood next to James at what looked like a foundation gala, both of them smiling. The body language was familiar, comfortable. Friends, maybe. I found her LinkedIn profile. Columbia MBA, 15 years in nonprofit management, currently living in Stamford. Her profile showed a recent post about corporate accountability and whistleblower protections, shared just 3 days after James's death. She knew, or at least suspected. I drafted an email, deleted it, started again. How do you explain something this insane in a message to a stranger? Finally, I wrote, Ms. Huang, my name is Tina Morrison. I'm Philip Whitmore's mother-in-law. Tonight I found evidence that James Adams hid before his death, evidence of embezzlement at the foundation. I have transaction records, authorization signatures, and proof of institutional fraud involving Philip Whitmore, Linda Vance, and Harold Whitmore. James left a note saying he confronted Philip before his accident. I don't believe it was an accident. I think you don't either. I'm attaching photos of the documents. I need help getting this to the right authorities before Philip realizes what I have. My daughter and granddaughter are in danger. I'm in danger. Please. If James trusted anyone at the foundation, I'm hoping it was you. Tina Morrison. I attached the photos, all 43 of them, and hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I sat back and waited, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. 5 minutes passed. 10. The library's fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A student at a nearby terminal yawned and closed her textbook. My email pinged. A response from Ruby Huang. Mrs. Morrison, I'm looking at the photos now. Oh my God. James told me he had proof, but he wouldn't show me. Said it was safer if I didn't know details. I should have pushed harder. I've been gathering my own evidence since his death. Anomalies in the audits. Discrepancies I couldn't explain. Linda kept blocking my access to files. Now I know why. I'm forwarding everything to the Connecticut Attorney General's office and the FBI. I have a contact at the AG's office. We went to Columbia together. She's trustworthy. But Mrs. Morrison, if Philip knows you have this, you're not safe. Neither is your daughter. The Whitmores have resources. They'll act fast to protect themselves. Where are you right now? I stared at the message, relief and terror warring in my chest. I typed quickly, Milford Public Library. I couldn't go home. He might be watching. What do? I can't let my daughter stay in that house with him, but if I tell her the truth, she'll confront him. She's stubborn like that. She could get hurt. Her response came within seconds. Don't tell her anything yet. Once the AG has the evidence, they'll move fast. Warrants, arrests, asset freezes. Maybe 72 hours. Can you stay away from Philip that long? And Mrs. Morrison, I'm forwarding you an email James sent me the day before he died. You need to read it. A new message appeared in my inbox. The subject line read, If something happens. I opened it with shaking hands. Ruby, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. Philip confronted me yesterday after I told him I was going to the board with evidence of the embezzlement. He didn't threaten me directly. He's too smart for that. But he said his father has resources to handle problems quietly. Said I should think about my family, about accidents that can happen to anyone. I told him I'd already hidden copies of the evidence, that if anything happened to me, it would all come out. I think I made a mistake. I think I made him more desperate instead of backing him off. My brakes have been soft the last few days. I took my car to a mechanic I trust. He found the brake line had been partially cut. Professional job. Meant to fail under heavy use. I'm scared, Pat. I'm going to take the evidence to the FBI tomorrow. But I wanted you to know. If I don't make it, if something happens, please don't let them get away with this. There are hundreds of real kids who need those scholarships. The Whitmores have been stealing their futures. Tell my wife I loved her. Tell my girls their dad tried to do the right thing. James' tears blurred my vision. James had known, had documented his own murder in advance, and he'd still died on that rainy night on Route 15, his brakes failing, his car going off the bridge. Philip had killed him. Or had him killed. The distinction didn't matter. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Morrison, this is Ruby Huang. Got your number from the email metadata. I've sent everything to the AG. They're taking it seriously, opening an emergency investigation. But they need you to give an official statement. Can you meet with an investigator tomorrow morning? I'll be there with you. I texted back, yes. Where? AG's office in Hartford, 9 a.m. I'll text you the address. Bring any physical evidence you have. The USB drive James mentioned. Do you still have it? I thought about the USB drive, still hidden in the Velveteen Rabbit on Pauline's nursery shelf. It's at my daughter's house. I'll get it. Even as I typed the words, I knew how impossible that would be. Philip wouldn't let me near that house again. Not after tonight. Another text. Be careful. The Whitmores will know something's wrong when the AG starts issuing warrants. They'll look for who gave up the evidence. You're the obvious suspect. I know. I typed back. I need to warn my daughter. Get her and Pauline away from Philip. Not yet. If she runs, it tips him off. We need the element of surprise. Can you wait until morning? Once the warrants are issued, the AG will send police to secure your daughter and granddaughter. They'll be protected. I wanted to scream. Every instinct told me to drive back to Westport, to bang on Rebecca's door until she listened, to grab Pauline and run. But Ruby was right. If Rebecca confronted Philip now, if he felt cornered, I thought about James's brake line, about how easy it would be to stage another accident. "I'll wait," I typed. "But if anything happens to them, it won't. Trust me. The AG works fast on cases like this. By tomorrow night, Philip will be in custody." I logged off the library computer, erased my browsing history, and walked back to my car. The night air was cold, autumn pushing toward winter. I sat in the driver's seat, engine off, and tried to decide where to go. Not home. Philip might send someone there. Not to any friends. I didn't want to put them at risk. I ended up at a 24-hour diner off I-95, the kind of place where waitresses didn't ask questions if you nursed coffee for hours. I ordered eggs I couldn't eat and watched the door, jumping every time it opened. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Rebecca. Mom, are you okay? Philip said you seemed upset when you left. I'm worried about you." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to tell her everything, wanted to warn her, to beg her to take Pauline and leave. But Ruby's words echoed. "If she runs, it tips him off." "I'm fine, honey. Just couldn't sleep. You know how I get sometimes. I'll call you tomorrow." "Okay. Love you, Mom." "Love you too, sweetheart. Hug Pauline for me." I stared at that last message until the screen went dark. Hug Pauline for me, as if I might never get the chance to do it myself. The diner's TV was playing the early morning news. I watched without seeing, my mind replaying the night over and over. The envelope in the diaper, Philip's footsteps on the stairs, the safe in the closet, James Adams's final email documenting his own impending murder. At 6 a.m., a new text from Ruby. "AG is moving. Warrants being issued now. Federal agents are involved. This is bigger than Connecticut. Stay safe. I'll see you at 9. At 7:30, my phone rang. Rebecca. I almost didn't answer, afraid of what I'd hear in her voice, afraid of what I might accidentally reveal. "Mom?" She sounded strange. Tight. "Can you come over? Right now?" My blood went cold. "What's wrong? Is Pauline okay?" "Pauline's fine. But, Philip, they have a warrant." Her voice broke. "They're searching the house. Police are here. They're saying Philip is under investigation for embezzlement and—" She choked on the word. "And murder. They're saying James Adams was murdered and Philip is a suspect." "Oh, honey," I breathed, genuine shock coloring my voice. "I'm on my way. Mom, they asked about you. Asked if you'd been here last night. Asked if you'd found anything in the house." A pause, then quieter. "What's happening? What did you find?" "I'll explain everything when I get there," I said. "Is Philip with you?" "No, they took him, arrested him 20 minutes ago." "Mom, I'm so scared." "Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in except me and the police. I'll be there in 30 minutes. I drove faster than I should have, my hands steady on the wheel now that the endgame was in motion. Ruby had been right. The AG had moved fast. Philip was in custody. Rebecca and Pauline were safe. But as I pulled onto their street in Westport, something felt wrong. There were police cars? Yes. 3 of them parked in the driveway. But there was also a black Mercedes I recognized. Linda Vance's car. And standing on the front porch, talking to Rebecca through the doorway, was Harold Whitmore himself, Philip's father, the foundation chairman, one of the men whose signature was on those fraudulent authorization forms. He shouldn't be here. Not if the AG had issued warrants. Unless? My phone rang. "Ruby. Don't go in that house," she said without preamble, her voice urgent. "It's a setup. Harold Whitmore has connections in the local police department. Those aren't real federal agents. They're private security dressed to look official. The AG's real team is 30 minutes out, stuck in traffic. Harold's trying to secure the evidence before they arrive." "Rebecca's in there," I said, my voice hollow, "with Pauline. And she just let Harold inside. Then you need to get them out, now, before Harold realizes you're the one who exposed them." I looked at the house, at the fake police cars, at Harold Whitmore's back as he stepped inside, Linda Vance following behind him, and I understood with terrible clarity that this wasn't over. It was just beginning. I grabbed my phone, opened the voice recorder app, and started recording. Then I got out of my car and walked toward that house, every year of my 69 years settling into my bones like armor. If Harold Whitmore wanted a confrontation, I was going to give him one he'd never forget. I walked up the front path slowly, deliberately, my phone recording in my cardigan pocket. The fake officers at the door tensed as I approached, hands moving toward their belts in a way real police wouldn't have needed to. "I'm Rebecca Whitmore's mother," I said clearly, projecting my voice. "She called me. I'm here to see her." One of them, mid-40s, ex-military bearing, the kind of private security Harold could afford, stepped forward. "Ma'am, this is an active crime scene. You'll need to wait outside." "Then you can arrest me for trespassing," I said calmly, "because I'm not leaving my daughter and granddaughter alone in there." I pushed past him before he could respond, betting that Harold hadn't authorized physical force against an elderly woman in broad daylight on a residential street. I was right. He let me pass, though I felt his glare burning into my back. Inside, the house was chaos. Drawers pulled open, cushions displaced, books swept from shelves. A thorough search disguised as police work. Rebecca stood in the living room holding Pauline, her face pale and confused, still in her pajamas. Harold Whitmore loomed over her, all Rubin authority in his tailored suit, while Linda Vance stood by the stairs with a leather briefcase. "Mom," Rebecca said, relief flooding her voice. "Thank God you're here. I don't understand what's happening. They're saying Philip—" Her voice broke. "They're saying terrible things." "Mrs. Morrison," Harold said, turning that cold shark's gaze on me. "How convenient that you've arrived. We were just about to ask Rebecca about your visit last night. Apparently you spent several hours alone in the nursery. Found anything interesting?" He knew. Of course he knew. Philip would have called him immediately after I'd left, would have explained everything. They'd been planning this response all night. The fake raid, the evidence seizure, whatever story they'd concocted to explain away their crimes. "I changed my granddaughter's diaper and put her to bed," I said, meeting his eyes. "That's what grandmothers do." "Mr. Whitmore," Rebecca interjected, looking between us with growing alarm. She'd always called Harold by his surname, never comfortable enough for first names despite 5 years of marriage. "What does my mother have to do with Philip's arrest?" "That's an excellent question," Harold said smoothly. "You see, Rebecca, your mother may have been the victim of a misunderstanding. James Adams, you remember James, Philip's dear friend, was experiencing severe mental health issues before his death. Paranoid delusions. He created false documents, elaborate forgeries designed to frame Philip for crimes he didn't commit. We believe he may have hidden these forgeries in this house, hoping they'd be discovered after his death. The lie was masterful, smooth, reasonable. Exactly the story a powerful man would tell to protect his son." "That's not true," I said quietly. Harold's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Morrison, I understand you're protective of your daughter. But you should know, we have documentation of James's mental state, psychiatric records. His therapist is prepared to testify that he was delusional, paranoid. If you found anything he left behind, anything that seemed to implicate Philip, it was all part of his illness." "Rebecca," I said, ignoring Harold, speaking only to my daughter. "Do you remember when you were 8 years old and Tommy Patterson broke your science project the day before the fair?" Rebecca blinked at the apparent non sequitur. "What? Mom, that's not—" "You came home crying, said it was an accident, that Tommy felt terrible. But I knew you were lying. I could always tell when you were lying. You'd look at me with those big eyes and that innocent face, but your left hand would fidget with your necklace." Rebecca's hand, I noticed, had moved unconsciously to the gold chain at her throat. "I asked you 3 times what really happened," I continued, "and finally you told me the truth. Tommy had broken it on purpose because you'd gotten a better grade than him. You were covering for him because you were afraid of what his parents would do if they found out." "I remember," Rebecca whispered. "I told you then what I'm telling you now. The truth matters, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Even when powerful people want you to stay quiet." I pulled out my phone, still recording, and turned to face Harold Whitmore directly. "James Adams wasn't delusional. He was murdered because he discovered that your family has been systematically embezzling from the Whitmore Foundation for at least 3 years. $8 million stolen from scholarships meant for underprivileged children. Philip created shell companies. Linda Vance falsified audits. You signed authorization forms for fraudulent grants. I have photos of every transaction, every forged signature, every piece of evidence James collected before your son had his brake line cut. The room went absolutely silent. Even Pauline seemed to sense the tension, going still in Rebecca's arms. Harold's face remained impassive, but Linda had gone rigid. One of the fake officers moved toward me, but Harold held up a hand, stopping him. "That's quite an accusation," Harold said softly. "Do you have proof, Mrs. Morrison? Or are you simply repeating the fantasies of a mentally ill man?" "I have 43 photographs of documents from the safe in Pauline's nursery," I said. "The safe that used to be in Philip's home office. I also have James Adams's note explaining everything, and his final email to Ruby Huang documenting that Philip threatened him, that his brakes had been tampered with. I've sent all of it to the Connecticut Attorney General's office and the FBI. The real FBI, not your private security team dressed in costumes." Linda actually flinched. Harold's expression finally cracked, rage bleeding through the polished veneer. "You stupid woman," he said, his voice ice. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Who you're dealing with?" "A family of thieves and murderers," I said calmly. "Yes, I know exactly who I'm dealing with." "Mom," Rebecca whispered, her face ashen. "Is this true? All of it?" I turned to my daughter, saw the moment she looked, really looked, at Harold and Linda, saw her begin to understand why they were here, why this elaborate charade, saw her world crumbling as she realized the man she'd married, the family she'd joined, were not at all what they'd seemed. "Last night, Philip locked me in the nursery," I told her gently. "He searched me, threatened to have me declared incompetent, said he'd make sure no one believed anything I said. He and Linda planned to institutionalize me to keep me quiet. But he made a mistake. He underestimated what a 69-year-old grandmother could do when her family was threatened." Pauline began to fuss, sensing Rebecca's distress. My daughter held her tighter, tears streaming down her face. "Get out," Rebecca said, her voice shaking but firm. She was looking at Harold now, at Linda. "Get out of my house, all of you." "Rebecca, you need to think about this carefully," Harold began. "Get out!" Rebecca screamed, with a ferocity I'd never heard from her. Pauline started crying in earnest. "My daughter and I want you out of this house right now. You don't get to stand in my home and lie to me. You don't get to threaten my mother. Get out." Harold's face went dark with fury. He took a step toward Rebecca, and I moved between them instinctively. This grandmother's body, suddenly the only barrier between my daughter and a desperate man who'd already killed once. "You'll regret this," Harold said coldly. "Both of you. I have lawyers who will tie you up in court for years. I'll destroy your reputation, Rebecca. I'll make sure Pauline grows up knowing her mother was too stupid to—" "That's enough." The voice came from the doorway. Ruby Huang stood there, flanked by two people in actual FBI windbreakers. Behind them, I could see real police cars pulling up, more agents emerging. "Harold Whitmore," one of the FBI agents said, stepping forward with credentials and a warrant. "You're under arrest for embezzlement, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice." The fake officers scattered. Linda Vance tried to run for the back door but was intercepted by federal agents. Harold just stood there, his face a mask of impotent rage, as they read him his rights and put him in handcuffs. Ruby came to me, placed a gentle hand on my arm. "Are you okay, Mrs. Morrison?" "I will be," I said, watching Harold being led away. "We all will be." The next hours passed in a blur. Real investigators went through the house, this time with warrants and proper documentation. Rebecca gave her statement, her voice hollow with shock. I held Pauline while federal agents recorded my account of everything that had happened, the phone recording I'd made providing corroboration for every word. Philip was formally charged with first-degree murder, embezzlement, and a dozen other crimes. The investigation into James Adams's death was reopened. An FBI forensics team examined what was left of his car and found definitive evidence of brake line tampering. By evening, Rebecca and I sat in her kitchen. My kitchen now, I realized, since Philip would never walk through that door again, while Pauline slept peacefully in her crib upstairs. watched over by a victim's advocate the FBI had provided. "I should have known," Rebecca said quietly, staring at her untouched tea. There were signs. The sudden money, the way Philip would get calls late at night and step outside, the way his father always seemed to be controlling things behind the scenes. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Why didn't I see it?" "Because you loved him," I said gently. "And because men like Philip are very good at hiding who they really are. This isn't your fault, sweetheart. I brought him into our family. I gave him a daughter. Her voice broke. "I let him threaten you. Lock you in a room. Oh God, Mom, what if he'd hurt you?" "But he didn't," I said firmly. "I'm fine. Pauline's fine. You're fine. And now Philip and his father will face justice for what they did." Rebecca reached across the table, took my hand. "How did you do it? How did you stay so calm? I would have fallen apart." I thought about that, about the terror I'd felt when Philip's footsteps had climbed those stairs, about the moment I'd opened the safe, hands shaking, knowing discovery meant death, about driving through the night with evidence that could destroy powerful people, alone and afraid. "I've spent 69 years being underestimated," I said finally, "being dismissed as just a grandmother, just an old woman, just someone's mother. People look at gray hair and comfortable shoes and assume there's nothing interesting underneath, nothing dangerous." I squeezed her hand. "But you know what being underestimated teaches you? It teaches you to think 3 steps ahead, to watch and listen and remember everything, to be patient, to strike when no one expects it." "You're amazing," Rebecca whispered. "I'm your mother," I corrected. "This is what mothers do. We protect our children, no matter what." 3 months later, I sat in the gallery at Hartford Superior Court, watching Philip's preliminary hearing. The evidence was overwhelming. James Adams's documentation, combined with my photographs and Ruby Huang's independent investigation, had exposed a conspiracy that went far beyond the Whitmore Foundation. Other charities had been compromised. Other deaths were being reinvestigated. The scandal had made national news. Philip looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, all his polish and confidence stripped away. He saw me in the gallery and his face twisted with hatred. I met his gaze steadily until he looked away. Let him hate me. Let him spend the next 20 years in prison understanding that the confused old woman had been smarter than him all along. Rebecca was rebuilding her life. She'd filed for divorce, taken back her maiden name, started therapy. Pauline was thriving, oblivious to the darkness that had surrounded her first year. And Rebecca had gotten a job, director of operations at a nonprofit that actually helped the children it claimed to serve. As for me, I'd gone back to my small ranch house in Milford, back to my quiet life of library books and morning coffee and visits from my granddaughter. People in my neighborhood had no idea what I'd done, what I'd survived. To them, I was just Tina Morrison, the nice older lady who always had cookies ready when the neighborhood kids visited. And that was fine with me, because I'd learned something important that night in Pauline's nursery, with evidence hidden in a humidifier and threats echoing through expensive walls. The most dangerous thing in the world isn't youth or strength or money or power. It's a grandmother who has nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Late at night sometimes, I'd take out my phone and look at the photos I'd taken of James Adams's evidence. 43 images that had brought down an empire built on greed and murder. 43 images taken by hands that had changed thousands of diapers, had cooked thousands of meals, had held my daughter through countless childhood sorrows. Ordinary hands that had done extraordinary things. I thought about James often, about his courage in documenting his own impending death, in trusting that someone would be smart enough and brave enough to finish what he'd started. I hoped, wherever he was, that he knew his truth had finally come to light. The foundation itself had been dissolved, its remaining legitimate assets distributed to actual educational charities. Hundreds of real students would get scholarships now, untainted by corruption. James's children would grow up knowing their father had been a hero, not a tragic victim of his own mental illness. And Pauline would grow up knowing her grandmother had protected her from monsters who wore expensive suits and smiled while planning murder. That was enough. That was everything. On Sunday mornings, Rebecca would bring Pauline over, and we'd make pancakes together in my kitchen. Pauline would bang on pots with wooden spoons while Rebecca and I talked about normal things: teething schedules, grocery sales, plans for the holidays. The house Philip had bought, the Victorian showpiece, had been sold to pay legal fees. Rebecca and Pauline lived in a modest apartment now, smaller than they'd had, but truly theirs. No shadows, no secrets, no locked doors. Sometimes Rebecca would look at me with something like awe, and I'd know she was thinking about that night. About everything I'd done to protect them. I never talked about it. Never needed to. The truth lived between us now. A foundation stronger than anything Harold Whitmore had ever built. One afternoon, Pauline, now 11 months old and starting to walk, toddled over to me and reached up with both arms. I lifted her, felt her solid weight against my chest, and she patted my cheek with one chubby hand. "Gamma," she said, her first word that wasn't mama or dada. "Gamma." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "She knows," she whispered. "She knows you saved us." I kissed Pauline's soft hair, breathed in her baby smell, and felt peace settle over me like a blanket. 69 years of being underestimated. 69 years of being dismissed, overlooked, considered past my prime. And in one long night, I'd proven what I'd always known. Age isn't weakness. It's weaponized patience, accumulated wisdom, strategic silence that explodes into action when the moment demands it. I was Tina Morrison. I was a grandmother, a mother, a survivor. And I had won. Not with violence, not with money, not with power or connections or any of the advantages Harold Whitmore had taken for granted. I'd won with intelligence, patience, and the fierce, unbreakable love of a woman who would burn down the world to protect her family. Let that be my legacy. Let that be what Pauline remembers when she's old enough to understand. Her grandmother was nobody's victim. Her grandmother was a force of nature. And anyone who underestimated her learned that lesson far too late. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.